Today on Dufresne Faith Journal.
I was leading the music, I did the offerings, did the announcements, preached the sermon, passed the offering bucket, greeted it, as they exit. I did it all. So I got up and I said, I'm the pastor. And they go, yeah, we know that. So I was the only one in the building who didn't know I was the pastor. All right, like this. Wait. Okay.
We're going to pick up where we left off, which was y'all had just moved out here, rented a car, rented a house, rented furniture, rented everything.
We got rid of everything and put all the money into starting, and we did. We drove a rental car, had a rental home, and then we went and rented a commercial building where we started our first services there.
Enterprise, I know.
Enterprise Circle.
Enterprise Circle, that was in Temecula. And Pastor Nancy had talked to us about the fact that Marietta and Temecula together had 50,000 combined. Now we're at a quarter I would say probably over $250,000 at this point. And then of course it expands into Wildomar and Lake Elsinore, which is where we're at right now at the castle. And so when God said move here, it didn't seem like a very prime location to start a church when God said, I want you to get in position for the last day revival, because there weren't many people. Kind of like, it does remind me of John Osteen. We had talked about in the last episode how he kept his backpack, but I remember him saying, God, I'm famous. Remember when he was on the mission field and everybody loved him and everybody knew him? I'm famous. Don't you know I'm famous?
When he started pastoring, nobody showed up.
Yes, a tin barn with 90 people. And here, Doctor had an established ministry. How many years had he been in the ministry?
Oh, he'd been in the ministry over 25 years at that time.
Over 25 years, and God is, instead of calling him back to go to Orange County or back to LA or...
Well, he knew this, and this is something people need to learn, because in the 70s he had a church in Torrance, California, and it was a thriving church, and it was having a real impact. Well, God spoke to him about going to Tulsa, and that's where we met. And he knew that if he came back out to California, he would not go back to the region he had been in, because he said he had left another pastor in charge of that church, and he was not going to do anything that would disrupt that church. So he understood the ethics of that you once something is turned over and you gave up your seat of authority, so to speak, in that region, that to go back would have disrupted, because he knew the people loved him, and if he started another church, the people that were already part of the previous church, they would be pulled. What do you do? And so he was looking out for the health of the church he left behind by not going in and starting a church that would challenge.
That's good. I know of different ones, different people in our congregation and others who have talked about they've taken that same principle with starting their business. They left a company, but they didn't take the employees with them. They said, I'll come with you, I'll start your business. And they said, no, it's not right. They could have taken customers' names and so the same principle applies not just with starting a church, but in every arena of life, being ethical, being right, because the word won't work for you. It can't work for you if you're violating
we can't violate
the
brethren.
Yes.
You've got to do what's best, and if what you're doing ends up compromising another brother, another pastor, another congregation, you don't do it. Plus there's enough room. But God told us to come to this valley. So different ones had ministered to him about going back to Torrance, California. He says, no, I won't do it, because that's against ethics.
That's good.
And God didn't tell him to go there.
That's
good. So he was listening, and so God had him here. And then we moved here in 1990, And the first thing we did is in 1991, he started a part-time Bible school. And that was started in September of 91. And then the next month in October of 91 is when we started the church. And we started with 12 people. It was Ed and me, and we had a couple staff members is all. And so we didn't even advertise it. We just got us going. And then it went from there. And we stayed in that building until about 98.
And I think in that time period, I know our congregation's favorite stories is Dad was still traveling.
Oh yeah.
And you were home with the congregation. And at that time of starting, you were Sister Nancy. And tell us a little bit about when God spoke to you about...
Ed said, when we came to California, he said, get back in position for this last day revival. He didn't say start a church at that point, so we weren't sure, but of course we were here a year, and Ed said, I'm going to start a church, and I go, oh, because I knew Ed wasn't going to stop his traveling ministry, and I loved to travel. Travel has always been in me, and so he said, he had me to preach while he was on the road, and I would say, you need to get an associate pastor in here to try to, to pastor for you since you're gone, because it never dawned on me I'd be a pastor. I loved to travel. And so for 4 years, he never got an associate pastor, to come in and fill in. And so I kept doing, I was leading the music, I did the offerings, did the announcements, preached the sermon, passed the offering bucket, greeted it, as they exit. I did it all, but it never dawned on me I was the pastor. And he would say, you're the pastor. And I'd say, I'm not the pastor. You're the pastor. You wanted to start this. And so I thought if I pastored that meant the end of travel. And I loved the change that came with travel. I like change. And so I felt like pastoring would just be one location. It would get boring for me. And so I did that for 4 years. I pastored without knowing I was the pastor. And so one day we had a conference there, and a man got up to minister, but when he got up to minister, I got caught up in the spirit. And God said to me, do you love me? I said, sure I do. And he said, then feed my sheep, Pastor. And you could have knocked me off the chair. And I didn't ask God about it.
Sure.
Because no, I'm
he
not.
Brought it up.
Really, if you see that, there's not a pastor arriving, you're doing the pastor, it might dawn on you to talk to God about it, but I wasn't going to do it. I wasn't going to bring it up because I didn't want to be pastor. So I thought if I don't bring it up, it can't be an issue.
Yes.
So he brought it up, and then he said, then feed my sheep, Pastor. So then it was funny because he said, I want you to get up Sunday morning and you announce to the people you're the pastor. Because that was news to me. It wasn't news to them. So I got up and I said, I'm the pastor. And they go, yeah, we know that. So I was the only one in the building who didn't know I was the pastor. So then, of course, that's 25 years ago now. 25
years ago, and then Dad continued to travel,
sure
and
you
still continued to travel with him.
And the thing is my function didn't change much because I was already functioning as the pastor. But thankfully, God allowed me to travel some with him. And I always sensed that there would be a day that I would go more so back into the traveling ministry, which, I have, especially since his homegoing. But I traveled a lot with him periodically, throughout the time of pastoring. And I loved getting to do both. Yeah. It kept it fresh for me. It kept pastoring fresh, and it kept the road fresh.
I think that's such a treat to get to do that for God.
Because not everybody gets to, and it's not right, because a pastor stays with the sheep, and rightfully so.
And what a help you've been able to be having pastored.
Yeah.
And now, having FOF and the insight of, instead of just having just the traveling, you've done both. And so you're a help to traveling ministers, you're a help to those overseas, you're a help to those that are pastoring and starting churches or having established churches, because having pastored 25 years, there's so much that you've been able to do. So what a blessing you didn't probably realize you would be able to be in the long run.
Well, and I
with
certainly didn't think I would be doing it for 25 years.
Sure.
But now that the family's grown up and is helping with that. I still, I'm still the lead pastor, so to speak.
Yes.
But now it's like as a child grows up, you can leave them a little bit more. When they're younger, you have to really stay there and be present and watch them. But as they grow, I can leave them, but then there's still pastoring gifts, because you share in that. And then my son Grant shares in that, and then Stephen helps on the road traveling. So we all do it together now.
Yeah.
And that frees us up to do both.
To do a lot.
To do a lot.
To do a lot. Well, I think with what we've talked about today, some of the things you can really take away is faith does whatever it takes. Yeah. And I learned that real quick out here.
And two, really what I should have done when Ed was telling me you're the pastor, instead of saying, no, I'm not, I should have asked God, is there something there? And I think that's where a lot of people miss it. They don't ask. And so it took 4 years for God to bring it up, but it didn't have to take 4 years if I would have initiated the conversation.
That's good.
Making
him a part of.
Well, it needs to matter, but of course, since I didn't want to pastor, that's why I didn't bring it up. But I love pastoring. Once I did it, it was the thought of it. It didn't fit into what I thought, and so that's where we miss it. We assume and we formulate our own ideas, and then when we do that, we don't talk to God as we ought about it. So I guess when he saw she's not bringing it up, I need to.
Well, and I know examples you've given in sermons is people get a small measure of what God wants, and then they take it and then they start trying to do with it.
They run with it too early.
Yes, and so y'all heard from God. You made the steps of faith. You did whatever it took to get out here, to get the church started, and then you heard clearly from the Holy Ghost, and then stuck with it. You didn't quit. You didn't stop, and so I think we'll end on that note today. So faith does whatever it takes, and then always bring God into the conversation. Don't hear a portion of what His direction is for your life and then assume.
Or put your own interpretation.
On it, and then run with it. Get clear direction. Hear about every aspect, the specifics for that plan. And so we'll finish up next episode regarding the history of World Harvest Church, and we'll hopefully end up in the building. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, we're all gonna stand in the tree like this.
Is Nanny kicking us?
Is we're like,
Right.
all right, like this. Wait. Okay.
Like a little rascal.
Oh, there you go. Hey, Amber, come over here. Get her attention over here. Just come over just a little bit. Morning. The Brady Bunch for sure. We're not there yet.
Look at her waving. Oh.
2 and 3.
There.
Picture.
You sit on the bridge and we stand behind. From over there.
It's a little dead. Here we go. Amanda or Amber. Great job. Look at you.
Thank you. I can get it. Hey,
The lead pouch.
Away.
Bubby, get the picture. You can
There you go.
Okay, but sit down right there.
Yes.
Go down there. Over there.
A little more that way.
Over here.
Are you good?
Hi,
So good. That's cool.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you for watching today's show. Be sure to check out all the latest episodes on our YouTube page. For more information, follow us on Facebook or visit our website at dufresneministries.org.